Imagine a gemstone so powerful that it is whispered it curses anyone who dares to wear it. Today, we will peer behind palace walls to uncover the mystery of the forbidden ruby. Why monarchs have for centuries shunned this scarlet stone, yet, unable to resist its allure, risked scandal and broken hearts. From the fateful story of Duchess Sarah to the ominous gift of 96 Burmese rubies, as if foretelling the final year of Elizabeth II's life, we will unveil the darkest secrets hidden in royal jewelry boxes. Stay with us until the end. It is then that we will show you the one and only ruby set without which even the most cautious queen could not do. Few would argue that monarchs' financial capacities, especially several centuries ago, were virtually limitless. And yet, when consulting jewelers, they did not often ask for anything made of rubies, preferring the more tranquil diamonds, the stones of love and passion. This is easily explained by the banal versatility of a colorless gem. No matter what ensemble a royal lady dons, the brilliance of diamonds will accentuate it without competing. However, there is another reason why blue-blooded women have always steered clear of this stone. The matter lies in the ruby's less than spotless reputation. Its mystical power was felt by Duchess Sarah of York when she married Prince Andrew and received a ruby and diamond ring. The marriage fell apart after just 10 years, and they were dogged by endless scandals throughout their relationship. Queen Elizabeth II would agree. She received 96 rubies from the people of Burma. According to local belief, each stone protects its owner from as many diseases as there are stones, and the queen passed away at exactly 96. And yet, many royal women every now and then commissioned court craftsmen to fashion lavish ruby necklaces, tiaras, and brooches. We understand it's hard to resist. So let us examine the most significant ruby treasures from royal jewelry boxes. The Danish Ruby Tiara. Today, the Danish Ruby Peru, consisting of a floral tiara set with diamonds and rubies, a pair of versatile chandelier earrings, a swag-style necklace that can also be worn in various configurations, a brooch, a bracelet, hairpins, and a ring, all inset with diamonds and small ruby clusters, made to appear larger, was created for Napoleon's famous coronation in 1804. Napoleon allocated funds for his marshals so that their wives could be appropriately adorned, and one of them, Jean-Baptiste Bernadette, purchased this Peru for his wife, the former Desiree Clary, once Napoleon's fiancée. The Peru came to Sweden when Jean-Baptiste and Desiree became King Charles XIV John and Queen Desiree of Sweden. Queen Desiree bequeathed the Peru to her daughter-in-law, Queen Josephine of Sweden, granddaughter of Empress Josephine, who then presented it as a wedding gift to her granddaughter, Queen Louisa of Denmark. In 1898, Queen Louisa gifted the tiara, then still a flexible bandeau, as a wedding present to her daughter-in-law, the future Queen Alexandrine, who inherited the rest of the Peru after Queen Louisa's death in 1926. Although the Ruby Peru is one of the most historic and significant Perus in the Danish royal family, it was not shown publicly until Queen Alexandrine wore the bandeau tiara for a portrait series in 2020. In 1935, Queen Alexandrine presented the entire Ruby Peru, including the low crown tiara and 2 large corsage brooches, as a wedding gift to Princess Ingrid of Sweden when she married Crown Prince Frederick of Denmark. The Ruby Peru became one of Ingrid's most luxurious jewelry sets for life. Soon after King Frederick IX ascended the Danish throne in 1947, Queen Ingrid refashioned the low bandeau of the Ruby Peru, using the 2 corsage brooches, into a more substantial tiara. The Ruby Peru remained one of Queen Ingrid's most worn pieces, especially because the original bandeau could not be taken out of Denmark, thereby requiring more tiara options for numerous ceremonial occasions during state visits. Queen Ingrid lent the Ruby Peru to her daughter, Princess Benedicte, for appearances in the 1950s, but unlike her other diadems, the Ruby Peru was never lent to other family members and remained reserved for Queen Ingrid throughout her life. Queen Margaret later recounted how Queen Ingrid wore the pair constantly and that it was her favorite piece of jewelry. Queen Ingrid last wore the ruby parure at the gala performance celebrating Queen Margaret's 60th birthday in 2000, just weeks after turning 90 and months before her death. Queen Ingrid wished the ruby parure to remain with the crown prince and then the king, and in 2000 she left it to her favorite grandson, Crown Prince Frederick. Less than 4 years later, the future Crown Princess Mary first donned the ruby parure at a banquet at Christiansborg Palace, and 2 days later at the pre-wedding gala at the Royal Danish Theatre. The ruby parure is only worn at the most official events: New Year's receptions, major birthdays, anniversaries, and official portraits. But in recent years, Crown Princess Mary also wore the parure at state dinners. In 2018, Crown Princess Mary introduced a new version of the tiara at the annual Danish New Year's reception by adding one of the new hairpins, giving it greater height. The tiara and parure were last seen at the annual Danish New Year's reception in January. The Burmese tiara. When Princess Elizabeth married Prince Philip of Greece in 1947, she received a wedding gift of 96 rubies from the people of Burma, believed to protect against 96 diseases. The rubies were displayed among other wedding gifts at St. James Palace in the days preceding the wedding, but were not worn. Another wedding gift was the Nizam of Hyderabad tiara, which had not been worn since the early 1950s, and by 1973, its diamonds were used along with the Burmese rubies to create a new Gerard tiara adorned with Tudor roses. The Queen first wore the Burmese ruby tiara during her first state visit to Japan in 1975. Since the 1990s, the Queen wore the Burmese ruby tiara at state banquets and celebrations during state visits to and from republics, usually Eastern European countries, and state visits to France, and the tiara was often worn in the 2000s, especially paired with Queen Victoria's crown rubies during the Jordanian state visit to the UK in 2001, as well as in the portrait commemorating her Diamond Jubilee with her Canadian honors. After nearly a decade's hiatus, the Queen wore the Burmese ruby tiara with Queen Victoria's crown rubies during the American state visit to the UK in 2019, symbolically accented by the blue sash of the Order of the Garter. Today, Queen Camilla is increasingly seen wearing the Burmese ruby tiara. The Peacock Ruby Tiara. In 1897, Queen Emma of the Netherlands used rubies from her predecessor, Queen Sophia, to create a new parure by Schurman & Co., consisting of a versatile tiara, necklace, and a peacock tail brooch, which Queen Wilhelmina commissioned as a lighter alternative to the Malario ruby tiara. The most striking example is the peacock ruby tiara, which Queen Wilhelmina wore for a series of portraits in the early 1900s and at one event in the 1930s. Queen Wilhelmina kept the tiara, and her daughter, Queen Juliana, wore the peacock ruby necklace at her inauguration in the new church in Amsterdam. And a few years later, she wore the necklace in her hair during her visit to the United States in 1952. When the future Queen Beatrix celebrated her 18th birthday in 1956, the Dutch royal family went to tea at Het Loo Palace with Queen Wilhelmina, where her jewelry box was on display. Instead of presenting it to the birthday girl, Queen Wilhelmina passed the peacock ruby parure to her younger sister, Princess Irene, causing much surprise and bewilderment. Soon after, Princess Irene began wearing the peacock ruby parure, making full use of its versatile elements. After her scandalous marriage to Prince Carlos Hugo of Bourbon Parma in 1964, Princess Irene received the Bourbon Parma tiara, to which she added a ruby, but she retained the peacock ruby parure, which then disappeared from view for decades, causing many to believe it had been sold. After decades of speculation, Princess Maxima wore the peacock ruby tiara with the Malario ruby necklace at the gala during Sweden's state visit to the Netherlands in 2009. Queen Beatrix wore the parure's brooch at events from the 1980s, but first donned the peacock ruby tiara only at the gala for Queen Margaret's 70th birthday in 2010. And she also wore it for one of her final official portraits as queen. Queen Maxima wore the peacock ruby brooch with the Malario ruby tiara for her first official portrait released before King Willem Alexander's inauguration. And the next year, the peacock ruby tiara, she wore it during the state visit to Poland, and again in 2015 during the state visit to Canada. It remains with Queen Maxima today. The Gravel Ruby Necklace. The ornament consists of 18 clusters of rubies and diamonds leading to a central diamond element to which 3 pendants are attached, each a flat ruby surrounded by diamonds. Initially, they served as a pair of earrings and a pendant. During the first decade of her reign, the late queen possessed only the Gravel Ruby Necklace, as the Queen Mother retained Queen Victoria's Oriental tiara and ruby peru. However, in 1964, the Queen acquired the Bearing Ruby Necklace at Sotheby's, which she first wore a few years later alongside the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara during her visit to Malta in 1967. The Queen continued wearing the Bearing Ruby Necklace into the 2000s, usually paired with the Burmese Ruby Tiara, but in 2005, the necklace was notably worn during the Queen's visit to Malta alongside the Oriental Tiara. During the last decade of her life, the late Queen wore the Crown Ruby Peru instead of the Naked Ruby Necklace, although it could now be worn again, likely by Queen Camilla or the Princess of Wales. Queen Victoria's Ruby Brooch. This brooch, a large oval cluster of rubies and diamonds, topped by a pear-shaped ruby and diamond pendant, has 2 origin stories. The first claims that the brooch was part of the opals and diamonds parure acquired by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert from Gerard in 1854 and passed to the crown after her death in 1901. However, her daughter-in-law, Queen Alexandra, deemed opals unlucky and replaced them with rubies from the necklace gifted to Queen Victoria by the ruler of Nepal. Yet Queen Victoria was depicted wearing a similar ruby brooch multiple times, leading some to think that this brooch is an earlier piece unrelated to the opals and diamonds parure. Despite changes, Queen Alexandra was never portrayed in the parure, but her successor, Queen Mary, wore a crown-shaped ruby brooch in a 1920s portrait. This supports the first theory since Queen Mary replaced the opals in the brooch with rubies from the parure only in 1926. When King George VI ascended the throne in 1936, the Eastern Crown tiara and the ruby crown parure passed to Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, and became her favorite pieces for life, one of the few that she wore until old age. However, the ruby crown brooch, also belonging to the Queen Mother, was not worn often, particularly for the portrait, the Rhodesian visit, and the banquet marking the return to the Netherlands, confirming the version that the brooch was initially not intended for the ruby crown parure. After the Queen Mother's death in 2002, the ruby parure and brooch passed to the Queen. By law, they belonged to her as the crown's owner, but, as we shall see later, she allowed her mother to keep many pieces until her death, which she used the Eastern Crown tiara and parure very sparingly. Queen Victoria's ruby brooch first appeared on the Queen at Ascot in 2015, and a few days later it was worn alongside the ruby parure's necklace and earrings at a German state banquet, and has not appeared in public since. Queen Letitia's ruby earrings. Remembering the Spanish flag, Queen Letizia, more often than other royals, wears ruby jewelry, though diamonds remain her preferred stones. However, there is also a pair of ruby chandelier earrings, unlike other pieces in this collection, purchased by the Queen with her own funds rather than inherited from the family jewelry box. True, Letizia does not often wear lavish earrings, preferring accessories from Zara or Mango instead. Queen Camilla's ruby necklace. Once the King of Saudi Arabia gifted a sapphire set to Princess Diana, yet to Camilla Parker Bowles, he presented a multi-tier ruby necklace. At the time, this gesture sparked much mockery toward the prince's wife, for some say the ruby symbolizes passion and vice, while the sapphire, fidelity and eternal love. Although it hardly explains why Queen Camilla so rarely wears the piece, her favorite gem is pink topaz. The Greville Ruby Bandeau. In 1907, the Honorable Mrs. Greville commissioned Boucheron in Paris to create this magnificent floral-style ruby and diamond bandeau necklace. It consisted of large rubies set into an elegant floral triangular motif and a pendant with a large pear-shaped diamond. The Honorable Mrs. Greville was not depicted wearing the Boucheron ruby necklace, and after her death in 1942, most of her splendid jewelry collection, each piece worth over £100, was inherited by Queen Elizabeth. When the jewels arrived at the Queen months later, the press drew unwanted attention to the contents of the black initialed chest. When Princess Elizabeth married Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark in 1947, she received the Greville ruby necklace along with Greville chandelier earrings with diamonds as a wedding gift from her mother, Queen Elizabeth, which were also among the jewels displayed at St. James's Palace. It took Princess Elizabeth several years to first present the Greville ruby necklace, which she wore alongside the Nizam of Hyderabad tiara. In the mid-1950s, the Queen habitually wore the Greville ruby necklace with Queen Alexandra's kokoshnik. The Queen continued wearing the Greville ruby necklace throughout the 1960s. Then, the Greville ruby disappeared from public view for almost 2 decades until it reappeared at the state opening of Parliament in 1983. It was also worn alongside George IV's state diadem in an official portrait in 1987, then vanished again. 3 decades later, the Greville ruby necklace re-emerged on the then Duchess of Cambridge, paired with Queen Mary's lover's knot tiara and Princess Diana's Collingwood pearl earrings at the Buckingham Palace banquet for King Felipe and Queen Letizia of Spain. The next year, the Queen first wore the Greville ruby and diamond floral bandeau, along with the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara at the Commonwealth dinner at Buckingham Palace in April 2018. Since then, the necklace has not appeared publicly. The Swedish ruby tiara. When Swedish Prince Gustav Adolf married Princess Margaret of Connaught at Windsor Castle in 1905, she received this stunning ruby and diamond tiara as a wedding gift from her uncle and aunt, King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra, together with a matching ruby and diamond necklace from the King and Queen's children. When Crown Princess Margaret of Sweden tragically died in 1920, she left the Edward VII ruby tiara to her son, Prince Sigvard. Prince Sigvard lost his princely title and position when he married commoner Erika Maria Pazek in 1934, and after their divorce, he married Danish woman Sonja Christensen Robert between 1943 and 1961, with whom he had a son. Until 1951, he was known only as Mr. Sigvard Bernardate, after which he was granted the title Count of Wisborg in Luxembourg. Later, he began calling himself Prince Sigvard Bernardate, although this title was never officially recognized, and his wives never wore it. The Edward VII ruby tiara was not donned until Countess Sonja wore it during the Netherlands' state visit to Denmark in 1953. After the 1961 divorce, Prince Sigvard married for the 3rd time actress Marianne Lindberg Chang, who throughout the 1960s repeatedly wore the Edward VII ruby tiara as both tiara and necklace. At some point in the late 1960s, Prince Sigvard gave the tiara to his father, King Gustav VI Adolf of Sweden, in exchange for funds, believing the tiara would be returned later. However, the king refused and instead bequeathed the Edward VII ruby tiara to Prince Sigvard's son, Count Michael Bernardate, upon his death in 1973, provoking Prince Sigvard's great indignation. Count Michael lent the tiara to Countess Sonja for a British state visit to Denmark in 1953, the same year Prince Sigvard began using the title Prince Bernardate, never acknowledged by his nephew, King Carl XVI Gustaf of Sweden. Between 1983 and 1988, the Edward VII ruby tiara was purchased by King Carl XVI Gustaf from Count Michael and first worn by Queen Sylvia as a necklace during a state visit to the Netherlands in 1987. The tiara continued to stir controversy when Prince Sigvard protested Queen Sylvia's wearing it at Prince Joachim's wedding to Alexandra Manley in 1995, after which it was not worn for several years. The Edward VII ruby tiara was again lent to Countess Sonja when she wore it as a necklace at a gala dinner in 2001, a year before Prince Sigvard's death, after which the ownership dispute was settled. By the late 2000s, Queen Sylvia wore the Edward VII ruby tiara much more frequently. The tiara was also featured in an exhibition dedicated to Crown Princess Margaret at the Royal Palace in Stockholm, and there is no doubt we will continue to admire this magnificent relic for many years to come. The engagement ring of Duchess Sarah of York. The Duchess of York's engagement ring is one of the most recognizable royal jewels. It features a huge Burmese ruby surrounded by 10 sparkling diamonds arranged in a floral cluster pattern set on a yellow-gold band, its rich hues drawing all attention. It is believed this stunning ring was crafted by the British jeweler Gerard. At the time, Sarah's favorite ring cost around £25,000, but accounting for inflation and its storied history, it could be valued at about £70,000 today. The Duchess wore this precious piece only until 2003, 11 years after their separation. Sarah also retained her wedding tiara, said to have been gifted by her relatives, the Queen and Duke of Edinburgh.